I was snoring so bad that it pushed my wife into the other bedroom. And so we were sleeping in separate bedrooms for years. I'd be in my bed, I'd wake up, look over, my wife wasn't there. She was actually down the hall, sleeping in the guest bedroom next to my kids. I didn't feel great. I was in not the best shape, mind fog, always woke up with dry mouth, and I didn't know why. Our nose is a filter. It's actually filtering out all the crap, all the garbage, because our lungs like clean air, just like our body likes clean water.
Hey everyone, Derek Hines here. Welcome to the podcast where I'll share with you the patterns, insights, research, and technologies that we use in my own pain and performance practice to help people improve their health, speed their healing, and increase their longevity. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. Alex, welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast, my man.
Great to be here. I appreciate it.
I've got all kinds of stuff that I'm interested to see where our conversation goes, to be completely honest. I'm like, half of our listeners are like patients and half are practitioners that we talk about like business stuff and some of that. And I was like, all right, we're just going to let this thing go down whatever rabbit holes we open up, so to speak. But let's kind of kick it off. So we're talking about hostage tape.
Yeah.
Tell me about how that got started. Tell me about the inspiration of starting Hostage Tape, a taping company with a funny name, all that fun stuff.
I know. I think the first thing that your listeners are thinking, they're going, hostage tape? Why would you call it hostage tape? Like, what, motivated you to do that? So prior to this business, I launched Hostage Tape about 3 years ago. We're coming up on third year. And prior to that, I was in sports. I was a football player. You can see I've got some jerseys behind me. And I had ran a business in sports video analytics for 16 years. And so when I had sold that business, I hit this rock bottom low point in my relationship with my wife, my family, my business, because I'd sold it. So, anytime you build a business and you sell it, it's a huge transition to go from that then to this new chapter of your life. And so at the time, I was snoring so bad that it pushed my wife into the other bedroom. And so we were sleeping in separate bedrooms for years. Okay, at this point, I'd be in my bed, I'd wake up, look over, my wife wasn't there. She was actually down the hall, sleeping in the guest bedroom next to my kids, because you could hear me down the hall. It sounded like I'm using a chainsaw like my dad back in the woods when we were kids, just sawing logs.
Right.
And, I didn't feel great. I was in not the best shape, mind fog, just always woke up with dry mouth, and I didn't know why. So I went down a rabbit hole of trying to figure out, okay, I called it like my extreme accountability moment in my life, like my Jocko moment of how do I take extreme accountability for what I can control and what do I need to do? And so I started with my sleep, because I'm like, okay, this isn't good. We shouldn't be sleeping in separate bedrooms. I shouldn't be feeling like crap. And most of us guys, right? We refuse to go in to see doctors. We don't want to go get help. We want to figure it out ourselves. And ironically enough, I grew up in a doctor's family. My dad's a doctor. So I had this aversion to wanting to go in to get help. So I just said, all right, I'm going to figure this out. And I went down the rabbit hole and I discovered James Nestor and his book, Breath. And in that book, he talks about that experiment, right? This famous experiment of he goes to Stanford Medical Center, plugs his nose for 10 days. And then over those 10 days, they developed snoring, sleep apnea, their oxygen levels went through the floor. And then after 10 days, they unplugged their nose, they mouth taped, and everything went away in about a day.
Yeah.
And when I read that, the light bulb just kind of went off in my head. And I thought, mouth breathing. I'd never heard that before. And being an athlete my whole life was startling that I'd never had a coach say, all right, Alex, we should be breathing through our nose. Like, at least as a football player, we're grunts. Like, that's not really a focus of what we do. Maybe if I was a runner or I was in track or cross country, maybe those coaches would have taught me that. But so when I went down this rabbit hole of mouth taping, my whole life changed. And that was then where Hostage Tape was born. It was born out of this life-changing moment this simple, crazy idea of putting tape on your mouth. And then as an entrepreneur, making that transition into, I just sold my first business. I went, all right, here's an idea. I can create a brand around this, build something really cool that inspires other men. Because let's be honest, what man is inspired to go into Walgreens and grab some 3M micropore tape and put on their mouth? That's not an interesting story. That doesn't inspire anybody listening to want to go do that. So I knew that brand, a story that was authentic, because my life was this brand. I knew that if I told this story and it had an interesting brand and a name, it would start a conversation. It would get other men to go, huh, that's actually really interesting. Or it might get women, wives to go, huh, I'm going through that. This sounds really interesting.
Here's my gift to you. Yeah, I'll tell you like kind of at my introduction to this. So in my office, so we do kind of pain therapy, regenerative therapy, right?
Yeah.
See a lot of headaches, a lot of neck pain, a lot of kind of nerve injuries, disc injuries, and we started working with a brilliant dentist, Stephen Olmos, a few years back. And one of the procedures that we do is something called an endonasal balloon in our office, where you go in and open up the cavities. Have you had that done?
That's going viral all over. I've seen that all over TikTok where people do it and they're like, ooh.
Yeah, it is. Like one of my patients said, it's a 7 or 8 out of 10 on weird, like a 1 out of 10 on discomfort. Like it's not painful, but it is quite weird.
Yeah.
But it does do a lot to get joints moving. We have a podcast on that. Y'all can go look endonasal balloon and y'all will find that. But we started doing some studies on patients who had nasal issues, who were mouth breathers with neck pain, and started doing endonasal treatments and opening up the airways there. And we would often give them a nasal strip after those procedures. Hey, use this for a little while. We had about 3 patients in a row that we had the opportunity to do an MRI of their neck before treatment and after treatment. And what we found was that opening up the airways and improving the air passageway in their nose within 3 months reduced disc bulges in their neck and improved the cervical alignment, because they're not breathing and creating all of this tension with their accessory muscles in their neck. And like that, you would unwind a lot of the tension that was created in their neck. And so it was like, oh, okay. Part of these people's issue is they try and get this moving. They go to sleep every night. They go back into this difficult breathing pattern that's bad for the body, and it just creates this constant tension across those. And every day they wake up like, whatever I'm doing didn't work. I feel like crap again.
Yep.
And that just started to unwind. Of course, like read James's book, started looking, okay, what are other things that we could give these people that would help? And of course, mouth taping started to become like, okay, if you're improving passageway in the nose, and we're encouraging that in the nervous system, man, how deep can these changes happen? So that was where I first came across you, and the power of making this shift from mouth breathing to nasal breathing.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing. And I think James even talks about what you're alluding to is the posture difference, right? When people are mouth breathing, they have a completely different posture that probably is related to what you're saying. So then when we start nasal breathing, now our posture changes. And then everything starts to open up and relieves pressure, right?
Yeah, it's so let's touch on that for just a minute. So when you're breathing through your nose, like what's the changes that are happening physiologically from like nasal breathing versus mouth breathing? I've heard you talk about that. You say it really eloquently. Tell the listeners like what that shift is.
Well, so you mean like just the health benefits that I talk about? So, okay. There's 4 things that I always talk about when we talk about like health benefits. And I assume I could be a little bit more technical with this audience. So the number 1 is you're getting more oxygen, and they report up to almost 20% more oxygen. And it's this concept that there's this 1-for-1 exchange of CO2 and oxygen that we get into our body, right? Oxygen comes in, CO2 goes out, right? And so it's related to this concept of the Bohr effect, right? Our body needs CO2 in order to be able to use oxygen. So the more CO2 that our body has, the better it's able to use oxygen and oxygenate our body. Okay. Now what that means is now if I'm exhaling through my mouth, I'm exhaling more CO2. So then my body has less CO2 to be able to get that oxygen uptake, right? By shutting my mouth now, I'm slowing down the amount of CO2. So now I have more CO2 then to get that uptake with the oxygen. Really simple. It's counterintuitive for most people, but when you understand the Bohr effect and that, you go, oh, well, that makes perfect sense. And then you watch people out running about and they're going like this. You go, man, everybody's doing it. No wonder we feel not great when you're trying to go for a run and you can't actually fight through it, right? It's because we're just not getting enough oxygen. Now, number two, when we breathe through our nose, we trigger the release of nitric oxide, right? When the air goes up through our nose, through our sinuses. And nitric oxide is a vasodilator, right? Opens up the blood vessels, really gets that blood moving, right? Helping the oxygen uptake. Number three is our nose is a filter. So it's actually filtering out all the crap, all the garbage, because our lungs like clean air, just like our body likes clean water, right?
Yep.
Lungs like clean air. And it's also then it's going through these turbinates, spinning around, it's warming up, and it's adding moisture to it, right? So that way then our lungs are getting warm, humid, clean air. And our lungs like that to be able to pull in oxygen better, okay? Versus this cold, dry, dirty air that we pull in, through our mouths. And then lastly, this one is not one most people think about, but it's our teeth. So when we mouth breathe, all the saliva then gets dried up, and that's got good bacteria that's protecting the enamel of our teeth. So when we mouth breathe, that goes away. Bad bacteria forms, dragon breath, right? All that forms, all this other stuff. Then it eats away, and you're way more prone to cavities.
One of the reasons I like this stuff, like especially something like this that seems so simple. There's a concept that we talk about that's a compounding health loop. I don't know if you've heard that term, but it's like these lead dominoes in our lives that like you're like, okay, well, I improved breathing, but the ripple effect in physiology that creates is like, okay, you're getting better nitric oxide, production, so you're getting better blood flow to all of the cells in your body. Like if you have digestive issues, if you have organ issues, if you have healing issues, you just leveled that up some percent,
Yep.
probably depends on the person. You get a bit better sleep, your body recovers, your immune system has more time. It's like this compounding investment that you created from changing these, like one thing. Like what are these like 5 or 6 lead dominoes? And we don't have to change our whole life to get this big ripple effect. And something like this that is easy, it has massive effects on multiple systems in the body. So like I feel like we talk about this and people are like, oh yeah, that's an easy thing. And you're like, you don't realize how deep this can go in terms of like changing this.
Well, here's a good way to look at it. So when people you can Google this and you can look at, there's all sorts of studies where they've looked at young children who were mouth breathers at a very young age, their whole life, and how it's changed the physiology of their face, right? Because when you're a kid, your skull and everything's still forming. It's not set until I think after you're 18, 20, 25. Somewhere in there is where it finally sets and our skull doesn't grow anymore. It doesn't change. And when you look at those pictures and you see what these kids look like and how their face is completely different than what a normal kid should look like as they grow up and how their jaw forms and everything, it's mind-boggling that it was just because they were mouth breathing, right? Completely then alters everything about how they look, breathe, and act, the rest of their lives.
Yeah, we've had I mean, like we see that a lot. I'm sure you're getting questions like, how young can we start doing some of this stuff?
Yeah.
Because we see, we'll help a patient with this, and they're like, well, actually, my son who's 8 or 9 is doing the same thing my husband was doing. Like, can we do some endonasal treatments? Can we get them in with somebody who's going to look at the development of their face and jaw at those young ages? And you can almost, once you've seen a few, and I'm sure you're like this now, you can almost like see it on someone's face. You're like, they're a mouth breather. They're breathing through their mouth.
When I'm out in public, I can just sit and look at people and go, and I know exactly who are mouth breathers or not, right? Just by looking at just how they are, where their chin is, compared to here. You can see it and all that. Totally.
What do y'all get that question? Do y'all have kind of an age of like, hey, when should somebody start doing this? I'll
I
let you
get,
answer that, but
yeah, I get that question a lot, and I like to tell. I don't like to be overly public about publishing it because when you're dealing with kids, and we're not a doctor,
yeah,
look, it's up to the discretion of the parents. And we always say, look, this is your choice. It's up to you. You kind of figure out what you think you need to do. But from our experience and what we know, because we are partnered with doctors, like we're partnered with the LAENT, the largest ear, nose, and throat clinic in California. So whenever we have any sort of medical, like we'll go to them and go, what do you guys tell your patients as it relates to this? And when it comes to kids, look, kids should not be mouth breathing, full stop. And so if they are, then there's no reason why they can't be mouth taping. It's perfectly safe, especially as a kid. Like it's not like they've gone through a bunch of fights and then they've got, issues where they just can't breathe out of their nose. I don't know, you tell me, but I don't know of many young kids who have like nasal breathing blockages because of some issue. So it's pretty safe for kids to do it. And then you can nip that in the bud and it makes a way bigger difference for them than it does, for us 45-year-olds. So,
yeah, yeah. If you started it early,
yeah.
I think the only thing there, and it might even be a good thing, is like, what does it mean to them? It's like, hey, I'm doing this thing that's probably a bit different.
Mhm.
What does that mean about who they are if they're doing that? One of the questions I had is like, how much do you think this is like people's like almost like a discipline practice, if that makes any sense? Like somebody starts doing this and they're like, I'm doing something for my health that's a little bit different. So when I wake up, I'm going to feel better. But also, that means I should probably go work out. That means I should probably like eat a little bit better. That
Mhm.
means I should, take the walk, take the stairs. Like, is it that tipping point where people just kind of use the momentum of doing this to make other good decisions? Do you see that at least from a branding perspective and also from like a user perspective?
Well, anytime you're changing behavior, that's hard to do. It's hard to change people's behavior. So when you're changing behavior, it's got to be an easy enough lift to be able to do that. And I feel like what we've created and what we have, it's a simple enough thing that people are already going to bed, they're getting into bed, they've got stuff on their nightstand. So adding in a little step of putting mouth tape on, it falls in line with everybody's current behavior anyways. We're not asking them to do something completely different that's outside of the realm of that normal behavior. So that's certainly helpful, right, for us and for them. And I think what we try to do with the branding is obviously hostage tape. It's very polarizing. It's different, but it's also very cool, right? There's a bit of funness to it, but there's a coolness to it. There's a badassness to it that we purposely leaned into that I think when people start to use it, there's a feeling they have, right? Of I feel cool. I feel like I'm part of this cool group that's doing this cool thing that's different. It looks as crazy as it might sound, it can look cool, right? When you've embraced it. And there's that. So then it opens up the door to what you just said, where now people are like, yeah, you know what? I'm being more conscious. I feel cool. I want to start doing cold plunges, or I want to start doing red light therapy. I want to start getting in the gym more. I want to start doing all these other things. And then you start watching more content. Because if you've looked at our content, we got a lot of talking head stuff. We talk a lot about health. We talk a lot about, those things that open up the door to their algorithm probably seeing Huberman talk about stuff, Gary Brecka talk about stuff, all these other people introduce different health hacks that they can start to do.
What's the brand mission?
Our brand mission is to help to change people's lives with this simple way, this very low hanging, non invasive thing, right? Just change people's lives and help them live better,
Yeah.
right? Be able to have better relationships, be able to make more money, to be able to feel amazing, right? And not have to go in to get surgery to do it, right? Because what's funny is, and you probably run into this, so our partners, the ENT guys, they tell us this all the time, like the amount of people who come in and they want surgery. And he's like, okay, let's pump the brakes. You probably don't need surgery, but the surgery is expensive. It's not covered by insurance, and it's probably not going to fix your snoring issue. So a really easy, simple thing is here, just try mouth taping. This could be a really simple, non-invasive way that solves this problem, right? So, and most people think, oh, I got to go get surgery. You probably don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we get it. Look, we're in the South, and certainly along this coast, allergens are tough. We're getting all kind of airstreams in terms of like bringing different types of allergens. It's hard for people to get used to it along the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
And so I bet you 50 to 60% of our patients have some version of breathing issues multiple times a year. And a lot of people will say like, I just got to have surgery. This is driving me crazy.
Yeah.
And that's where we started like kind of what stack of things, surgery's way up here, but then you have all these other things that we can start to do to improve that. Mouth tape, breathing exercises. Let's just start teaching you how to rebreathe. Certainly, if you have some structural issues before we do surgery, let's do something less invasive like an endonasal balloon. Start working on some of that, correct some posture stuff, start getting you moving. And you're like, there's a very large percentage of the population that will avoid surgery and get insanely healthy doing that. There's some people who have some structural issues.
Right.
But my question to those is like, what if they started doing this earlier? What if they started doing this? What if their parents recognized it when they were younger?
Well, the amount of guys that I've come to me who, because one of the big questions from a lot of dudes is like, well, I've got a deviated septum. I was a fighter, or I took a couple of baseballs to the nose, or something. I don't know that I could do this. And the amount of guys that we've had who say, dude, I totally did it, because you just have to retrain your nose, right? And so what they've told me is some of them have had surgery, but for the most part, they've said, I just had to force myself to breathe through my nose, continue to fight through it. And as I used it more and more and more, it started to open up, because when I had the issue, I wasn't using my nose. And when you don't use it, you lose it, right? It starts to close up on you.
Yeah.
But then when they use it, force it, it starts to slowly open up again, right? And then they're like blown away how they can actually breathe through their nose when they're mindful of keeping the mouth shut and doing that.
Do y'all have a lot of kind of like before and after pictures or anything like that people have sent in?
We've had a few people post it on our reviews, but again, what I try to be very careful of is you always get it's viral on TikTok where they say, look at how my whole jaw changed because I started mouth taping. I'm like, it's not real. If you're an adult, it's not real. It's an illusion, and I'll prove it to you, right? So, yes, if you're a kid, 100%, that's true. From a kid, as you get older, that can absolutely do that. But as a 45-year-old, it's not going to do that. And so I'll show people, I'll say, okay, let me show you. If I've got my mouth open, right, look at how my jaw looks, right? Like this. Now, if I close my mouth, put the tongue on the roof of my mouth, and I mew, right? Now I've got a really nice jawline. Yeah. Right? And that's what you're seeing. There's no real before and after. It's just, look, we shouldn't be mouth breathing. We should be nasal breathing. And when you actually have proper posture, yeah, your jaw actually does look better because you have proper tongue posture rather than doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a patient who came in, she went through a full workup, right? Like, she got treated. We did endonasal on her. She started doing some mouth taping. And her daughter said, Mom, you had a facelift. And she was like, no, I didn't. I'd tell you if I had a facelift. She was like, you had a facelift. Look. And so she starts showing. So she comes in, and I think it's like everything, right? Like the inflammation, the bags under her eyes are gone. The muscle tone in the face is now better with that. Like just the whole face looks like it's more symmetrical in a better position. Yeah. Now she did have a slight deviation nasally that improved while we were doing some of that, and so just everything in there looks better. And then so she's like, look, here's my two pictures, and just how much younger I look in this picture. And it's a lot of that, right? Inflammation, muscle tone, position of like how they're holding their face. So I was like, oh, yeah, I
Well,
wonder if people are like, look what happens.
that could be that's something I actually hadn't thought about was the inflammation, right? Because when you're mouth breathing, you're literally in like this fight or flight mode. Your body is. So you're right. That's an element of it that I haven't really touched on or talked about before. Which, if we were gonna probably talk about it in the right way, that would probably be the better way to say, okay, your face actually is going to look better. It is going to change because we're not in fight or flight mode, you know. So
Yeah, muscles are working a little bit better. You probably got better neuromuscular communication, so the tone in all of the facial structures is better.
right.
All of these things. Going back to the name, going back to hostage tape. It's very funny whenever I talk to people about this because like I've heard this from multiple people. They're like, "Oh, I don't really like the name, but I love the product." And I'm like, it taps on, and this is where I think this is genius. We think we make some of these decisions rationally. Like people think we make a purchase decision like, oh, let me think through it. Do I like the brand? Which is not at all how it happens, right? It's like we create some emotional pull in people. And even if they think cognitively, they're like, oh, I don't know if I like that enough, but they know it. And
Mm.
like that emotional pull that got created in them is enough to where they like it even gives them a story to tell to friends whenever they're talking about it. Was there that much thought given to it of like, you may get to a point where you're not completely, on board with the name, but you're going to like our product anyway, and you're going to know our product because of the name. And so going all the way back, like we did it on purpose.
100%. I was very mindful in why I chose to call it hostage state because look, in this day and age, attention is the currency. It's so much easier to build a business nowadays than it was 20 years ago. So anybody can go on and create a Shopify store or be on Amazon and now do TikTok shop and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, what's going to make you stand out? And I'll never forget, I was listening to Moise Ali. Moise Ali is famous for being the founder of Native Deodorant. Native Deodorant is his all natural deodorant that we all see in Target. It's all over the place now. And he used to say, look, when you walk down the aisles at Target and you see a wall of blue or a wall of white, there's an opportunity there. And the opportunity is to create something that stands out, right? As long as there's the big enough TAM, there's a big enough market there. So I knew right away that building this brand was the way that we were going to make it happen because you said earlier, people don't make decisions on logic. They make decisions with emotion and then they rationalize the emotional decision with logic later. Say, yes, I made the right decision because XYZ. Okay. And so hostage tape was all about so here's why I named it that. Now, the logical reason is when I first started a mouth tape and I discovered it, I used to warn my children. I would say, okay, guys, if you bust into the room and you see me, just don't freak out. It's going to look like I'm being held hostage. So don't freak out. Okay. I'm just wearing mouth tape because if you see somebody wearing mouth tape for the first time, you're like, dude, what are you doing? You look ridiculous. It looks completely crazy. So, but then I realized as I just discovered it and I'm like, there's a business opportunity here. What do I do with this? I realized, wait a minute, that's it. The flip side is the emotion. It's people feel held hostage by poor sleep or their partner and they don't know what to do. So don't let bad sleep hold you hostage. That was the idea. It was using emotion to tap in with hostage tape, right? And at the time, and I still am, I'm a huge Liquid Death. I love Liquid Death.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Liquid Death, water. I mean, you would never think that, oh, I'm going to love drinking some Liquid Death, right? And water is the thing of life. Yet, conversely, it's talking about death on it. Okay. Yeah. And so we knew that hostage tape was going to be polarizing, a very polarizing brand that you either loved it or hated it, but that's okay, right? Great brands do that. They're polarizing. They don't meet everybody's need, but they stand out and they stand for something. And we stand for this authentic story of who we are, why I started it, and why it's called hostage tape. And so when you see hostage tape come across your feed, or you hear somebody talk about it, you're like, whoa, and you never forget it. You will
Yeah.
never ever forget it. And now, because we're the largest mouth tape brand in the world. We're the number one seller on Walmart. We're the number one seller on Amazon. Like, we'll be the first one in retail here in January. There's all sorts of copycats that have come out, but guess what? They're all forgettable. They're all forgettable because nobody can stand out because of the brand hostage tape.
Yeah.
So
Y'all have been on, it's been a skyrocket, right? I mean, y'all have just gone crazy. And you said y'all are hitting 3 years this year,
yeah,
or did y'all hit 3 years already?
this will be we're coming up on our third year here. Yeah. And yeah, we're an 8-figure brand. So, and we're the sleep aid of the UFC, right? We sponsor Joe Rogan. So I mean, just the amount of like well-known people who use us is crazy. In fact, so Chris Bumstead? Chris Bumstead is probably one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. Now, I love Schwarzenegger. I grew up in the 80s. Schwarzenegger's the GOAT, but Chris Bumstead's like one of the new GOATs, huge hostage taper. He just dropped a video last night where he's doing this new thing with his app, but he's a hostage taper, and hostage tape is part of the video and the prize giveaway that he's doing. But to see Chris Bumstead, a guy like him who's insane, guys like that on that level talking about us who use us on a nightly basis is amazing.
What's been the hardest thing about scaling to this level over the last couple of years?
The hardest thing about scaling this is it's dealing with the success. And here's what I mean by that. When you go from 0 to $1 million and then to 8 figures, it all sounds great. But when you jump that fast and you scale that fast, then there's all sorts of problems with scaling that people don't know. It's not like you're rolling in the money and you got all this money. It's now you have all the problems that a big business has. So going from nothing to that, now you got all this inventory that you have to try to account for. You got all this marketing spend with Meta and Google and everything. You've got all these things that add up, right? That you have to account for, and then you have to keep accounting for more and more and more as you grow and you scale.
Yeah. What would be if you would go back, let's say 2.5 years, and you're telling yourself like, hey, here's a couple things that I just want to put a bug in your ear about that might make this a little bit smoother. What would be some of those things?
Oh boy. I think so. Most of our most of the money that we spend is on Meta, right?
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, Instagram marketing.
Yeah.
Because very early on, I knew we were going to scale this business by putting everything into Meta. It's still hands down the best place that you can market, get a direct response, sell a product, sell a service. Because in fact, I think I was just listening to a pod the other day where like there's 3 billion people actively on Meta every day. And that's half the population of the world is using Meta every day. It's still the number one place to be able to market and find your audience of people who can buy your product or service. And so I would say it's going back and being even better dialed in to that, because I learned it myself. I purposely learned how to do Meta myself because I wanted to be able to control the largest things that I could control that would scale us. I didn't want to put that in somebody else's hands. So I learned it, and I would go back and I would try to dial it in even better, because you learn, you fail, you learn, you fail, right? And there were some pretty big learnings and some pretty big failures in that when you spend a lot of money. So I wish I could go back and make a few tweaks on that could have given me a better return on the amount of money that we spent as we continued to scale.
Gotcha. Yeah. What was there? like any major mistakes that y'all made along the way? I mean, y'all are here, so there's nothing nothing too catastrophic. But was there would that be hires? Is that people? Is that any like system stuff that you would have changed?
Well, I would say some of the biggest mistakes are related to like your financial stack, right? Because again, as you're scaling, you have to be ahead of where you need capital. And what I mean by that is whenever you need financing and capital, it's not available. And then whenever you don't need it, it's available, right? So the challenge that what you have to do as a business owner and entrepreneur is you have to look ahead and see, okay, if this is where we're growing, this is how we're scaling, I have to start building relationships now with lenders, with banks, with institutions. So that way, as we scale and we get there, I know we're going to need a line of credit, or I know we're going to need inventory financing. I know we're going to need all these things in the financial stack that you have to plan ahead for. And I I did some of that, but I wish I would have done that better to be able to account for the scale that we had and to have better financial stack in place to be able to help us grow and scale even smoother.
Yeah, gotcha. What's y'all's team? What's the team look like now?
Yeah, we've got about 20 people, I think.
Nice.
So,
This might be a weird question. So you were a high school football coach?
well, okay. I was many things in football. So I I was a professional quarterback. So I played professional for a number of years. And then I was also at the time a high school football coach while I was playing. And then when I retired from playing, I still coached. And then I started my first business. And then at the tail end of that, I retired from coaching because I had a family. I got 2 kids, my wife. And now recently, now that I've got this business, we've been scaling, I decided I'm going to get back into coaching. So now I coach my son's freshman team this year. And so it's fun to get back into, because, when you're an entrepreneur, all the hobbies go out the window. Like you don't have a hobby. I'm working 7 days a week. So I felt like, okay, I've got a big enough team. I've delegated stuff and I need a hobby. So football was my first love. And my son is now a freshman in high school. So, all right, let me reach out to the football coach and say, here, let me help. Let me help with coach the football team. And it started from there again.
So what lessons or maybe like skills do you think being a coach helps someone be a better CEO?
Oh boy, there's a lot. I think an athlete and a coach, either one. But what you learn as an athlete and a coach, for anybody who's never really truly been an athlete and a coach, what they don't understand is how boring, monotonous, and a daily grind it is. Because you wake up, you go work out, you go to the gym, you go to training, you go to practice, and then you repeat that every day. Especially when you get into college and the pros, right? It's the same thing every single day. And so what you learn is the ability to focus, to be determined, to grind, right? And to continue to fail and learn, because every day in practice and every week you're failing. You have all these micro failures that then you have to learn from. And then there's these feedback loops that we have, right, in coaching and playing, where we watch the film from practice and we go, oh, okay, I'm making these mistakes. I got to learn from that and adjust. So we're learning, failing, adjusting every single day, right? And you're doing it in front of people, in front of a large group of a team, or in front of thousands of people every week. And you have to be able to deal with that and learn. So, and that's what it's like to be an entrepreneur, man. What it's like to be a business owner that most people don't know. And if they get into being an entrepreneur for the first time and they weren't athletes, it's really hard, because then you come to realize that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's not all glory. It's a lot of failing. It's a lot of getting punched in the face. It's a lot of getting knocked down and then learning how to get back up, continue to move forward, learn from those mistakes and keep going. So I would say being in the athletic world, that's one of the best things it teaches you. And we're already primed and ready. All of us athletes and coaches are primed and ready to be entrepreneurs just because of the life that it is.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I agree on all of those levels. I work with other doctors in terms of kind of adding regenerative services to their practices, and one of the things we talk about is like it's exciting in the beginning, and I'm like, that's gonna fade, and you're gonna get to the boring middle where it's like do more, do it better, do more, do it better, do more, do it better. And like, you're not always changing anything. I think that's when people kind of get like squirrely, like, oh, I need to do something new. I need to do something different. And you're like, no, you don't. Just you're on the path. You need to do more of what you're doing and less of what's not bringing value to either your company or your patients in this instance.
Right. Totally.
What is next for Hostage Tape? What's the horizon look like?
Yeah. So I've always said this on almost every interview. We're going to be $1 billion brand. And our next step is getting into retail. So this next year is all about going into retail. We're going to be launching into retail here in January with our first 400 stores. And then hopefully we'll be expanding into many, many more after that. But that's retail expansion for us in 2025.
What's that going to include? Like, do y'all got to be iterating on products and all that kind of fun stuff?
So we do have some ideas on new product lines because we're all about obviously improving sleep, improving breathing in really simple, easy ways.
Yeah.
And not complicated things, not technology, not all these other, but just super simple ways. And really in general, it's continuing to evolve the brand into this idea of don't let life hold you hostage, right? So it becomes much more about hostage rather than hostage tape. But don't let life hold you hostage. Don't let fill in the blank hold your family hostage, hold you, hold your wife, right? And but outside of that, it's just continuing to grow and get more people wearing mouth tape, honestly. You know,
I think that's kind of one of the nice things about y'all. You know, they say like, you know, if your product's for everybody, it's for nobody. But I feel like this is one of those things that you're like, how many people cannot benefit on some level from improving breathing, improving sleep, ...
Well, yeah, a stat that I cite quite often is there's 128 million households in the U.S. and over 71% of them mouth breathe at night. So think about that. Think about how many people are mouth breathing who could be benefiting just from mouth taping. Yeah. So there's a big enough TAM there for us, and that's not kind of
I think so.
World. So,
what does your typical kind of healthy day look like, Alex?
All right. So this is my. I'm very particular about my routine, and you're lucky, Doc, because this pod dipped into my normal morning routine. So normally, I get to my desk at about 10 a.m. and because I've got a routine. So here's what I do. I usually get up about 5:30, 6 a.m. And then I come downstairs, go to my office. I do a stretching routine because I feel like as I get older, it's really important that I stretch and I stay limber because I'm sitting down too much. So I stretch, I do red light therapy, and I take a whole bunch of supplements, vitamins, probiotics, vitamin D, all sorts of those types of things, resveratrol, like just a bunch of different things there that I take for me. Then I'll take my son to school, and then I go to the gym and I do the sauna, I do the cold plunge, and then depending upon the day, I'll either do like a 3 to 5 mile run or I'll do the gym. But when I do the gym, at my age, I'm not a football player anymore, so I'm not pushing a bunch of iron around. I'm just doing pretty easy, some body weight stuff, but just very not overly complicated things, right? Body movement type things. In fact, one of the new things I've been working on is, the older that we get and we stand too much, our hips and our back hurt as guys. And So what I learned from one of our partners from the Power Project, we work with Mark Bell, the Power Project, Nsema. They were teaching me this new technique of, you know, what we need to do as we get older is to not stay neutral so much, but to rather work on like using like a weighted rope or med balls and working on being non-neutral when we move, right? So that way we're working our core and other elements of not always staying neutral when we're doing exercises, right? Then our back doesn't feel so stressed, right? Because we're working those things. So I've been working on doing a lot more of non-neutral movements, right? So that I can lessen the lower back pain and stuff just from standing and
Yeah.
stuff.
Have
But
you dug into a mace yet? Have you done any mace stuff?
I'm not really into that. It's kind of weird, but I'm trying to do things like weighted ropes, med ball stuff, right? Kettlebell stuff where it'll be standing in front of a mirror and then doing just like different movements where I'm not neutral,
Yeah,
right?
teach your body to be dynamic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yep. So then and then outside of that, what I'm doing is I only eat once a day. And I don't, I mean, you would call it intermittent fasting. I'm basically doing like a 24 fast, right? So I don't eat for 20 hours and then there's a 4 hour window where I eat. So I don't eat when I wake up. I take another round of supplements in the afternoon. So there'll be another batch because what I try to do is I think if you overload yourself with too many supplements in one time, your body can't maybe use them all. So I try to spread it out into morning and then the afternoon. So the afternoon, I take another batch of some supplements, and then I still don't eat. And so then when I get to the evening, 5, 6 o'clock, then I'll eat dinner with the family and everything. So I'm only eating that once a day. So that's kind of where I'm at. So
Yeah, I like a lot of that. You're checking a lot of the boxes that we see people miss when we talk about the physical. Like we start with sleep with almost everybody who's trying to change
mhm.
like habits because it's the biggest thing that you're going to get an early win on, where you're like, I feel different. Of course, like being physical is usually second. Can we start getting you moving better? And one of the things we start working on is balance. I'm like, how many people go and actually practice balance? Like losing balance, get on a balance board and start like
Yeah.
working that. But if you improve that, even as like a 40 to 50-year-old, you feel like you have a superpower. Like if
Hmm.
you can get and stay balanced, your body is so less stressed, your back is less stressed, all these things. But certainly as we age, almost anytime we see somebody who we say like, oh, look, they're getting old, what we're actually seeing is they're losing balance. Like they're starting to shuffle, they're bringing their center of gravity in. So it's like whenever you start kind of adding in like these weird things, that's the stuff that moves the needle where somebody's like, man, I feel good. I feel
No.
incredible. Maybe I'm like not working biceps, but I
Yeah.
feel incredible.
Another thing I'll do sometimes is the I do the treadmill that it uses your weight that you push, not the one that are motorized, but I'll use that one where then you can add resistance to it, and I do it backwards. So then you're doing backwards movement, and I think I learned it from the knees over toes guys. He was talking about it, where we don't ever think about that. We don't ever think about actually turning around and doing it. And what you realize is that's actually way more relevant to a lot of our movements, especially as we get older, going up and down stairs, right? Is that movement of pushing backwards is so much more, important for us to work on than turning around and then just walking forwards.
Yeah, love it. Alex, love what y'all are doing, man. I really do. I think, again, as kind of like a lead domino for a lot of the people listening to this to grab this and like just start getting some of these changes in your system so you're sleeping better, you're getting better blood flow.
Hmm.
All of the downstream effects from that just affects every part of your body. So keep doing what y'all are doing, man. I think y'all are changing a lot of lives. So keep it up. One of the questions we ask all our guests is if somebody's listening to this and you could tell them to do one thing today to improve their health, what would the one thing be?
Tape your mouth at night. That's simple. Like, don't let bad sleep hold you hostage anymore. Honestly, that's an easy, low lift thing that you don't even need hostage tape to do it. You could go, there's probably plenty of tapes in your house that you could at least experiment with it. And then when you realize, oh, wow, this is actually isn't so bad, then you can go to hostagetape.com and get some hostage tape. So,
Where, yeah, you mentioned that. So hostagetape.com. Where can people follow you, find out more about what you're doing, start maybe
yeah.
planning for some of these retail locations? Where can people find out more about all that stuff?
Yeah. So go to hostagetape.com. You can get us there. We are on walmart.com. We're on Amazon. And on all the social medias, you can go to at hostage tape. And then I'm Alex Neist at all the socials as well.
Love it. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate you kind of tweaking the wellness routine for us, man.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
No problem.